In the shadow of the standing stones, I feel the memory of the earth. Voices rising from the ancient dark, calling fire into rebirth. The old ones speak through breaking light, through wind that carves the sacred lore. They lift the past into the present to guide the path we walk once more. Bringing the past to the present for a future forged in flame, where wisdom flows like rivers old and the storms recall our name, where creation stirs like thunder, where the universe draws near, and the awe of the wide and ancient sky cuts through doubt and fear. Every heartbeat is a promise, carried forward from the stars. Every sunrise holds a secret, hidden deep in who we are. I feel the strength of all before me, ancestor, mountain, storm, and sea. Their power rises in my spirit, their knowledge walks with me. Bringing the past to the present for a future fierce and strong, where the wisdom of the ages flows in me and flows in you, where the stones awaken power, where the sky reveals the whole, and the wonder of the endless cosmos sets the fire in the soul. Bringing the past to the present so the future learns to shine in the dawn of life's great mystery. The ancient strength is mine.
Hello, hello. We're having some difficulties here. Let me see if we can put ourselves into frame. There we go. Jason, you can change your volume. Is that it? So you've changed, you tried another microphone? And you can change the microphone in the settings. Should just come out and start again. Yeah, you just go out and come in again and set the new microphone. We are still waiting for Vince anyway, so to those watching, I'm sorry for this setback. And so my name is Ricardo Calvario, and I'm joined by James Shears. And I will now encourage him to speak a little bit about himself while Jason fixes his problems. Jim, tell us, the audience, your story, who you are.
Oh, I don't think that's a very good way to start. Well, I'm pretty old. I was a teacher at the university for about 30 years in surveying and civil engineering department during a time of change in surveying technology. And we surveyed the effigy mounds in Wisconsin and surrounding states very precisely as merely a student exercise, and found out that the ancients who laid them out did so to the nearest minute, which was unheard of in our view of things. Previous mounds had been surveyed by compass control for north to plus or minus a couple degrees, and here we found accuracy in the layout to the nearest minute, which is about the same as the pyramids of Egypt were laid out. But if they could do it over there, I guess there was no reason they couldn't do it here.
Test.
We can hear you, Jason.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So that's where I come from. We surveyed hundreds, if not thousands, of mounds and dozens or hundreds of groups across several states, and see a geometry that we can read like a new book, and that's what's exciting.
Jason.
What's up, man?
Hi. You are very low now. Oh, okay. It's the microphone. This was away.
Yeah, how am I now?
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
Okay, there we go. What's going on, dude? I know we just left each other over there doing 3 hours, and sorry for the issues. So, folks, I told Ricardo to go because I was running Jacob and trying to eat and all of that. We just ended a show, maybe 45, 50 minutes ago. I know you had to run get Mr. Shears, and I had to stretch Jacob and put food in my stomach. Anyhow, I told Ricardo to go ahead because I knew we had our intro, but I forgot that meant I couldn't adjust my audio. And it always messes up when we're already live and I try to get in Riverside. I don't know. But anyway, I'm here now, and here finally, there we are with Mr. Vince. So hello, everybody, and welcome. I pulled up the chat. I've been dealing with this thing, but we're here. We're good to go. Ricardo and I don't know. Ricardo said he didn't spend all of his energy on our 3-hour Mars disclosure, although he did get rather heated about the spiral formation, flow of the galaxy, which we won't get him started here again, Vince, as you work on your own audio technical issues, but it's been a good day. I think we had really good content there with the Mars disclosure, man. That was excellent conversation all the way around. The chat played an excellent role as well, I thought. I do like in Streamio how we can all link together and then we see the chats from everybody else's page. So it was really, I like that experience, as
In here it's the
the
same.
podcaster. Yeah, but you haven't shown me how to link I can't link our stuff in here because we don't
If
have
you
that
click
tier.
the chat, in the chat symbol, you have the public chat and you have the private chat.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, like, over there, we were all streaming on our own YouTube platform, right? So if you commented on Institute's YouTube or on Shaman's YouTube,
Oh, everything it's seen
in
on
the podcast, right? Those of us that were in it, in our chat, we saw all of the chats, right?
Oh,
so
I
it was
see. I see.
yeah, that was new for me and interesting. I liked that. So
Yeah,
it was just cool. There was a lot of participation, which is what we like to see. Sarah was there. Dave, you couldn't get enough either. Look at you, stalking. He's over here to figure out the rest of that moon thing.
I started at 10:30 in the morning with the trialogues, which went for 2 hours. Then we had the Mars. How we call the series? Mars
Mars disclosure.
Mars
Live.
disclosure, and that went for 3 hours plus. And now we are honored by the presence of James, and thank you, Vince, for coming, because I would very much like to see you and Jim interact with your experience, since you know each other for a long time, and so
Well, I know him. I don't know if he remembers me. But
you remember him.
Of course, I remember.
You are too low. You have to speak louder. I'm not. We
Yes,
are
I
not.
remember
Using,
you.
yeah, we are not using headphones, so you have to speak louder because it comes from the speakers of the mic.
Okay. Is that better? Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Sound check.
Let me see. If
Okay.
I can bring this closer. Okay.
Well, I still have the book on agates from Upper Peninsula, Michigan that you autographed, Jim Shirts, and I really appreciate that. So
it's an exciting area.
yes, absolutely.
I was trying to describe your findings in Cahokia to Jim,
Oh, okay, right. I'd be happy to go over some of that.
Well, I remember somebody, I think it was Sue English, maybe referring to your work about mulberry trees and silkworms down there. Is that solid or is that just
Yes.
fic in my imagination?
No, that's right. There was an effigy of a silkworm found at Cahokia. It's a stone effigy carving that's in the shape of a silkworm. And there were silkworm cocoons as well. Mulberry trees were found throughout Cahokia Mounds. And when the French arrived at Cahokia, they found silkworms living and eating the mulberry trees. And so there's evidence based on the effigy that was found in a mound of a silkworm that this goes back to the time of Cahokia when they were inhabiting the area making effigies. Can't hear me?
No, no, no. It's
No,
the
your
dog.
dog, Ricardo. I was joking that it wasn't Jacob. I put him in his kennel, so that's not him.
Oh, that's my
Well,
dog.
how do
And
people,
Ricardo, if we can, just for a second, did you really? You must have been in a bad hurry. Are you eating McDonald's?
Oh yes, milkshake.
Okay. Did you eat the food?
No,
Okay. Good. Otherwise, we'd have to have a talk. Milkshakes
no,
are
no.
okay.
It's just I just like the milkshake, and Jim loves his milkshake, so we stopped and get him a milkshake.
I love a milkshake, man. To me, a cheeseburger and a milkshake is like if heaven doesn't have one, I don't know. I'll have to think twice. Cheeseburger and
No,
milkshakes
I
are
don't. But I don't eat at McDonald's unless I don't have a choice.
right. Yeah, I've found myself in those positions. Anyway, not to derail us, but it seemed like we needed to fill a little bit of air, and I couldn't believe there was a McDonald's cup. But I endorse the milkshake always.
Jim, you're making a question.
well, I was just wondering how those silkworms are passed off there at Cahokia, unless there was contact with China, which makes a logical
This is the
probability. So, what's the official version of why the silkworms are there?
it's the haha moment.
Well,
Silkworms.
well, yeah, the connection with China is prevalent, and this possibly could have been brought by the Chinese when they visited the area in the 1400s.
Right.
And the other possibility is these silkworms were brought by the French when they were living in the area in the 1700s. You know, the natives described having silk cloth in the journals of the 1700s. Lepage Duprat and Jean Bernard Bossu, the French explorers, had described silk cloth and tapestry that the Native Americans had at that time.
Yeah, and some people have said
And
those are Cecropia moths or something like that, not Chinese silkworms. What's the response? Are they really
so
Chinese silkworms?
they were in fact silkworms. And in the Sutter collection at the Madison County Museum, they have about five of these in their collection from Monk's Mound, and somehow these silkworm cocoons were preserved. These were actual silkworm cocoons made of silk, and somehow they were preserved, and they're in the museum of the Madison County Museum. So it would be great to be able to carbon date them. There's radiocarbon dating that could be done, or there's other techniques that could be used, like amino acid testing, that could determine the age of these.
Well, seeing as how you said they were found entombed, does that at least predate the French? You mentioned 1700s. When were they unearthed?
Well, it's hard to say when they were unearthed or anything other than they were in the Sutter collection. The the catalog tag about these silkworm cocoons labels them as cocoons found by Sutter. And Sutter used to be living on Monk's Mound, and he was associated with Thomas Ramey, who lived there also. I mean, who was living on the land. So This dates it to the late 1800s, early 1900s when they were discovered, and so beyond that, it's hard to say like how old they are. The testing would need to be done to determine the actual origin or age. And there's also testing that could be done to determine where they're from. The amino acid testing could tell us the age as well as radiocarbon dating. But
Okay,
there's other methods
so we
that
know that they
I had
found
sent.
we know that they found the cocoons, right? But there's also
Yes,
stories of the indigenous peoples using the silk, right? So how far back go
yes,
those stories?
1600s and 1700s. When the French came through, they kept journals and they documented this that the natives had silk tapestries and silk cloth, and so we know this from their journals that they were being used by the natives, and they had been found in Louisiana and Mississippi and among the Natchez and the Illinois as well. Jean Bernard Bossu described it as finding these silk cloths in use by the natives, and LePage Duprat's as well. So we know it dates back to at least the 1700s, and their journals were the early 1700s. The dating of these actual silkworm cocoons could be determined by amino acid racemization, which is a method that uses amino acids to determine the age. And then there's also other methods like it can actually determine the provenance of strontium isotopes in the silkworms. Stable isotope analysis could be used to determine the location of the mulberry leaves that they consumed. So
But you mentioned
the silkworms,
go on, go
go
on.
ahead. I was going to say that amino acid testing is called racemization. It only costs $100 to do this test, so it would be a very affordable method, whereas radiocarbon dating could be used as well, carbon-14 dating. That can be used to determine the age of the actual silkworm cocoons.
But you also mentioned the 1400s
But
by the Chinese. Is this accepted by academia that the Chinese were there in the 1400s? Because I never heard that.
I mean, yes, the Chinese arrived in the area in the 1400s, and there's evidence that they arrived at Cahokia Mountains and they drew the Piasa, like the Piasa glyph above Cahokia Mountains near Alton. That was believed to be a Chinese painting that they applied to the cliff.
What do you know about this, Jim?
Well, yeah, it's very significant. Do you happen to know a Osage couple? It's Nicholas and his wife. You know them?
Yes, Mark, Mark and Lori Nicholas.
Yeah,
They
and
told
they've
me all
got
about this, and they wrote a book.
they had Osage, which happens to be the same language family as the Ho Chunk, stories of the Chinese. And when Gavin Menzies was doing his work in England on the fleet of discovery that the Chinese launched out of Nanjing, or I think it was, they got in touch with the Nicholases. And Mark talked about a bunch of graves along the Piazzo River, I think, that had Chinese jade in them. Had you ever heard that, Chinese jewelry?
Yes, that's right.
If that's the case, that would be, I think, something well worth a serious study, because that would be proof then that the Chinese, were buried there.
You think the Chinese were buried
Yeah,
where?
that's right.
Near where the Alton Piazzo was painted. That was a big deal in China. They had a celebration there honoring this launching of the fleet, and somehow they got word of Mark Nicholas and his work that he had been doing previous, and they got him and his wife involved. And there are two books which used to be available on Google. I don't know if they still are, but one is Chasing Dragons by Mark, and then they were over in China, and I think her name is Lori, his wife, knew Chinese,
Yes.
and the admiral gave her a book, one of the very few books that relate to this expedition, and she has translated parts of it, and that's called To the Gates of Feng Tu. Very, very important stuff in my book.
Yes, and I showed him these pictures of the silkworm effigy as well as the silkworm cocoons at Cahokia, and so at the museum they used to have these on display. It was labeled anthropomorphic bug, but it has the segmented bodies and the face and everything, all the spots of a silkworm. You know, this is an actual silkworm, a picture of one. So they're very similar or identical in body structure and shape, and this actual effigy is about 5 inches long, and it has the spots of a silkworm and the segment and the everything about it is identical to a silkworm, but it's made out of stone. I mean, this was a stone carving, and it was on display at the Cahokia Mountains Museum. When I volunteered there, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, do you know this is a silkworm?" And it was kind of surprising, like because it's labeled anthropomorphic bug, but they apparently knew what silkworms look like, and they told me that no, this is definitely a silkworm effigy. So does this place Cahokia on the Silk Road? Did the Chinese bring the silkworms there? I mean, it opens up a whole you know dialogue and mystery that is it's really important.
Have we ever found anything other than the Mueller Museum cocoons and that anthropomorphic bug? Anything like remnants of clothing, remnant? You know, I know. I look. So it tells me here when I ask about silk use amongst Native Americans and French journals, it says that they're mentioned sparsely in the 17th century and then mostly in the 18th century as it relates to silk ribbons, right? That were attributed to trade with Europeans. So it seemed to me it'd be helpful if we'd found any traces of any type silk fabric that could not be traced to, oh, that's from European trade. That's obviously an item, you know, that a European would have had. Have we found anything along those lines?
Well, I can tell you there is evidence of finding tapestry in mounds, and they may have been made of silk. It's hard to tell at this point. Even in Ohio, near the Welch butterfly bannerstone and Wilmington tablet, they found tapestries, and they may have been silk. There was other mounds like Spiro Mound that had tapestries. So, but silk doesn't preserve very well for a long amount of time. So, if it was silk, it could have degraded and decayed away quickly. And just the journals of the French are direct evidence of having silk among the natives. And I mean, the silkworm cocoon, the actual cocoons that were found in the Madison County History Museum, as well as this effigy of a silkworm, I mean, those are direct evidence that Cahokia had been using silk or had silk in the presence. And the fact that mulberry trees were there in the 1700s shows that they had the food needed for providing silkworms to be fed.
Did you said Madison? Madison Museum?
Mulberry trees, yeah.
Mulberry trees, because the silkworms only eat mulberry tree leaves.
But I mean, did you said Madison Museum?
Madison County Museum in Illinois is what
Oh,
has
it's
the
Illinois.
silkworm effigy. I mean, the silkworm cocoons. The ones in the Sutter collection are in the Madison County Museum in
Not close
Illinois,
to
which
me.
is just north of Cahokia.
It's far away from here, right?
Yes, but I will just pass a couple stories along. Over at Aztalan, which was a northern ceremonial area of the upper Mississippian people from Cahokia, as I understand it. That's in Wisconsin. There were our temple and still are temple mounds there, and definitely a active group of people still in the Ho Chunk legends. They didn't like them because of their human sacrifice at that time, religious sacrifice, but they were active until around 1200 when they were driven out, according to the Ho Chunk. We were surveying mounds there years ago, and the local archaeologist was working there as well. She was from Milwaukee, but she was a state archaeologist. And she described finding a horse skeleton in one of the mounds, but it was a small horse. So I asked her what the date of the horse bones were. And you may not be surprised. She said, well, look, since the Indians didn't have horses, this was obviously a farmer's horse bone, pet horse that was buried there. Well, I said, that isn't very scientific. You should get a date on it. And she finally consented maybe they should, although she said the state doesn't have money for dating farmers' horse bones. But the date did come back in supposedly in the 1800s, if I can believe it. So I shared that information with this Menominee guy, Pamita, and I said, well, this is the way they treat those things. Rather than dating something like skeletons, they assume that they couldn't be real because it doesn't fit their time frame. And he gets a little upset and he says, oh, sure, we had horses before the Spanish came, but they were little horses. They were too small to ride. We used them as pack animals. We called them the big dog. Oh, that made sense. Big dog is a name that's associated with Prairie du Chien, in French mean prairie of the dogs. And I asked what dogs were there. Well, must be prairie dogs. Well, it was where the Indians were gathering for fairs in historic times to trade horses. And Pamita said, well, we had these horses, and we didn't ride them. We used them as pack animals, like a dog. And later, I find within the last year or so, there's still a group of people in Canada that have these horses, little horses. They're kind of wild Mustangs in the woods. They call them the spirit horses. So they're still here. But that's contrary to somebody who said because the Indians didn't have horses, there's no sense of dating the bones. So I asked Pamita, I said, well, where did you get these little horses? From the Norse? He snorted and he says, no, from the Chinese. And when we were over to China with the International Crane Foundation, went to the poorest area of China, the only place they let us work. And the horses they had were little ponies, like Shetland ponies, They used them to pull carts and so forth. So you've got that, and also, you familiar with the Jeffers petroglyph site out in Minnesota? It's worth
Yes,
visit.
I've heard of it.
Well, it's when we were surveying, it was just a farmer's field. Now it's the most popular park in Minnesota, but there are hundreds and hundreds of petroglyphs there, and one shows what they call a moose, female moose. The only trouble is that this female moose has a fetlock, which only a horse has. And right below it is a small horse print. And then you've got a site in Ohio as well, which show bear tracks going across a rock area carved in, and also horse tracks, small horse tracks. So if we put in credence to what the Indians say, they had the horse before the Spanish, but it was too small to ride.
Okay, so there's one thing I would like to introduce here is, if I'm not mistaken, one of the several species that they say disappeared with the Younger Dryas is that North America had a type of horses, but they were smaller, right? But they also consider it to be part of the megafauna. So any animal that is above 60 pounds, they call it, it disappeared with all the rest of the megafauna, those horses. So my question is, what if they didn't disappear? And what if the Indians were already taming them?
Well, what if the Chinese really came here? If you read these To the Gates of Feng Tu, the people, Chinese people came in and had boats just for horses and their fodder. So they came in with lots of horses. And there are people out west that claim that the horses out there that were there when Lewis and Clark came in were not from the Spanish breed, but from a Chinese breed. And so if you look at all the data, it supports what the Native Americans have been saying all along, that they had horses before the Spanish. Now, whether whether those horses came from the megafauna or, as Pomita said, from the Chinese,
sure.
doesn't matter, but there were horses in the Indian lore here before the Spanish came.
Yeah,
But
horses, it says here, were widespread and abundant in North America for millions of years. This is for the audience, guys. Before the Younger Dryas period, they evolved into the continent and persisted through multiple glacial and interglacial cycles until their extinction near the end of the Pleistocene epoch, which would be what Ricardo was referencing as the Younger Dryas. Yeah, so they were here. So Ricardo is saying, could they, a couple of them, have survived this catastrophe? And we'll have to look up what was the size of these horses. Anyway, to see if they could have downbred, right?
Well, if you take a look at the screen here, I wanted to show this. This is a Mount Pisgah, North Carolina effigy.
Give us a
And
little bit more
apparently
zoom.
it's a-
Try to occupy the whole screen of the presentation. Yes, thank you.
Okay. How's that? So this apparently is a human riding a horse. I mean, they're holding on to the mane or the stirrups, and they're on the top of a horse, which is covered in crosshatching. And this person appears to have clothing that's also crosshatched, like armor. Some of these it looks like they're wearing a helmet. And Lori
You have
Nicholas,
another angle.
I could pull up one, but this is the one I have just in front of me. Let me see if I can find another one. But this one in particular, Lori Bonner Nicholas said, this looks like a Ming Dynasty warrior with Ming helmet and Ming armor riding a horse. And so her description of this was really, this is evidence of Ming in North Carolina, and this is as close to anything as we could find of a person riding a horse in North America.
Well,
depicted as
yeah. I mean, on this one, Vince, I got to say, until I see another angle, I mean, at least from this one, I could just as easily be seeing some sort of almost anthropomorphic looking human figure riding a bear. You know, it could be very ritualistic in that manner as well.
Or a cow. It looked like a cow to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'd have to see another angle before we just say it's a
well.
horse.
I'll try to pull up another one, but yeah, that was one that
We have to
Lori
consider.
identified
You have
as.
to consider that the oral traditions of some of the tribes go back 2 ice ages, Jim.
Yeah, the Ho Chunk thought say there are two ice ages.
2 ice ages. So there was lots of horses 2 ice ages back. Right. So and even if they were brought by the Chinese, it could even be the other way around. The Chinese could have get them here and take them,
Yeah, the
or the same race
book
on both sides.
translated by Laura Nicholas is very interesting to me because it tells about the different ships, and it was a world sponsored, I mean, it was a world exploratory effort with hundreds of ships, some of them big ships, and some just for horses and food for the horses. And then in what she translates, they stay at Cahokia for a couple of years and unfortunately bring smallpox, which makes the natives mad and they force them out. But they also talk about exploring the sweetwater seas to the north, which have to be Lake Michigan and Lake Superior. And in Lake Superior, finding some stuff which I think I know where they were exploring to. And up in that area, there's also people who found all kinds of Chinese, old Chinese stuff or Japanese stuff, which they are passing off as, well, obviously from somebody from the Second World War had a big collection he brought back and lived there. So that is up there. It's still waiting to be properly analyzed. But as far as I'm concerned, this is solid material. And the way to get into it is with the Nicholas book. Is that the writer you showed just a little while ago, Vince? Is that out of Nicholas' book, Laura Nicholas?
No, this is one that is at the Valentine Museum in North Carolina. And I mean, this was found in North Carolina in Mount Pisgah, and it's currently curated at the Valentine Museum. And there were a lot of figurines of people riding horses in this collection. It
Now
wasn't just that one.
that makes perfect sense because the general who was in charge of, he was a eunuch general of bringing all these Chinese here for these couple of years. They don't know where he died. He died on the trip. They found in North Carolina, in that area, it was some sort of port, his medal.
It's like
That's
a
right.
seal. Like a
That he
seal.
got from the emperor, right. And so he apparently died there, or certainly had people who were based out of that area.
Yeah, and it was Feng too. I guess the emperor, and it was documented by Lori Nicholas down to the casting of the metal. In her book, she describes how the journals of the Ming had recorded how they made a casting defect and had to grind it out, and it was identical to the actual medallion found in that area of North Carolina.
So, but my
So there's
question,
no chance.
my question still remains: Do academics recognize the Chinese in the 1400s in North America? Because I never heard that. Do they accept that?
No, a lot of
No.
them don't. But there are persistent Chinese scholars, professors from China, that can said they can read some of the script on the Ulmic pieces, and this is solid stuff that will stand up. But we are protecting the wall very carefully, trying to keep everybody out before Columbus. But they're getting through, and it depends who you're talking to.
See, it would be a calamity if China were here before the Europeans. Now it's all Chinese. So it's not like, it would be a geopolitical calamity. Let's not pursue that then. So probably that's why it's still
Well,
hidden.
it's sensitive issue, but extremely important if we want to get to the truth of the matter. It's good stuff.
Well, I think it's one amongst many. I mean, there are so many that I think we could say were here before Columbus, right? I mean, this is yet another one, and intriguing because, especially to the American mind, it is the Far East. You know, that is just it seems more foreign, right, than saying, yeah, but actually the Vikings got here, and we got somebody from the Mediterranean, and by the way, the copper went somewhere. It's kind of sexy, the idea of the Asian, but it's one amongst many, many, many. And it's very interesting. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, to me, the curious thing is, I would suppose that China would arrive in Americas from the West Coast, right? But no, they came in expedition through the whole world, and they arrived from the Atlantic, right?
Well, the group that went up to Cahokia, I would understand, came through the Atlantic, but certainly we've got lots of records of them coming from the Pacific. Are you familiar with a book by Henrietta Mertz called Pale Ink? If not, it's well worth digging out. I think she's dead now, but she wrote long ago about being over in China as a missionary or something and seeing all of these documents about people sailing to the land across the Pacific Ocean, which they called Fusang. And there is actually a book by the name of Fusang by her as well. But she says there were, in the Chinese records, the first account that she got of exploring was 2000 BC under Emperor Yu or Yi, and then another group in 500
Vince, I'm going to take that from you for a second. Keep going.
by a
Excuse
bunch of
me.
missionaries, and then later other people. But continually. They were supposedly each summer collecting sea otter furs in what they call the Fox Islands, which, of course, from Korea, you can go up to Japan Islands and then connect right to the Aleutian Islands, and you go down to Santa Barbara, California. And they found Chinese anchors and stuff there too. This is solid stuff. We don't want
So-
them there, but nevertheless, it looks like they broke.
Mr. Shears, here is the book you referenced, Pale Ink, Two
Yeah.
Ancient Records of Chinese Exploration in America by Henrietta Mertz.
That's very, very worth reading it. Yeah.
Excellent. Just wanted to give our audience a look at that. Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
It's available online then.
It's some of it, at least. Yeah, I'm in a PDF version of it on an internet archive at the moment, but there were several other options. I just grabbed the
Okay.
first.
Because they like to suppress this kind of thing, so I'm surprised that this one escaped. Is it considered a fiction? Is that it? It's a novel instead of a
It's a
historical?
limited-
No,
creepy.
definitely. The kids over there learn this sort of thing in school. It's a document. It's called history. And not only are there books, there are big rock stelas which got engraved every 100 years for the most important things.
I like the map here of the currents. I mean, it really does show just the ease of which the water flows. It's like we often talk about, Ricardo, in the transatlantic journey. Here we are in the Pacific, but you've got the currents that would just darn near whisk you on your way, whether you were sailing intentionally or not, over from at the Asiatic. There we can see what looks like what we call Japan, right, down at the tip, up over to what we know as Alaska, and boom, here's North America. Yeah. Easy peasy. We had boats.
Yes, that's what I was going to say. How
And India called this land Pat- Patala, and the Chinese called it Fusang, and Tibetans had a name for it. And all the people from that part of the country, you try to tell them about the Chinese coming here before Columbus, and they kind of laugh and say, yeah, we knew all about that. We teach that in grade school. My daughter teaches English as a second language to advanced students who come over. And she said when she tries to share our work with them, they say, oh, we know all about that. We're taught that in grade school right through high school. Only in America do they say it's not possible. And that they also said when they come here, they're warned that all the children believe in Santa Claus, and all the parents believe that Columbus discovered America.
Columbus is the first. They also believed that he was a nice man,
no,
and he
sorry,
wasn't.
sorry, Jason, just a second. I understand that part about Columbus, but what do you mean about Santa?
So
Well-
what is your first of all, nobody tell Ricardo where the presents actually come from, and please do not even think about telling him about birds and or bees. Now, Mr. Shears, what is your take on what you just referenced, I think, as that Columbus wall? Why it is that there is such a strong resistance to the idea of something before Columbus in general, no matter which nation we're talking about coming here. What's your take on the Columbus Wall and why there's this complete reluctance to anything other?
Well, I'll divert to what somebody else thought about this. Joe Mahan, who's dead now, was once in charge of the Tourist Bureau of Columbus, Georgia, and had yearly meetings there of what he called ISAC, Institute for Study of Ancient American Cultures. And he had people from all over the world coming there because he was working with a group of natives in Oklahoma called the Yuchi. And he had never heard about it before until they came to visit him. And this old guy says, well, we were a group of people who had trading tribe from India who settled in the Caribbean, and then we had farms along the Mississippi River near Columbus, Georgia, until we were moved on the Trail of Tears. Well, Joe had dug up and found some writings down there that was clear that there was pre-Columbian contact, but it was forbidden. And so he finally gets people together and starts having conferences. And we had people from Pakistan and India verifying that there's a group of people in China and India called the Uchis, who were traders, and they had a sub-tribe called the Sauk, just like the Sauk up in northern Wisconsin here, who were controlling the northern river, part of the Mississippi River. Well, in these meetings, there were people from across the sea coming and talking about this. And most powerful to me was works by a guy called Wow. Shaman Lao. It's something worth checking out. Shaman
Vince, can you
Lao.
press mute real quick while he's talking?
Okay.
Thank you.
Shaman Lao. And I've got copies of the book that we got from Joe, but I think you can get him elsewhere. He was no minor person. He was a colleague of Mahatma Gandhi, politically active. And he wrote a book, Hindus in America. And he's documenting what the people from India say about it, and that the Uchis are merely one of the tribes that got here. But he said further that the Americanists, that is, the people who are also in Europe who want to have this version that's now perpetuated by the Americanists, that nobody came to this country before Columbus of significance in boats. He says this is a myth, and that the Americanists have built a invisible wall around the American continents over which will allow nobody from his part of the world come before Columbus. Well, that didn't fit very well either, because at that time he had a British passport, and when he was visiting Mexico, they pulled his passport and he had to spend the rest of his life down there. So the politics are very strong. Now, why would that happen? It gets right back to why do the Indians here get accused of being dumb savages when they could square the circle and trisect angles and had higher knowledge of geometry than what the Europeans had? Because manifest destiny was what was being peddled back 100 years, 200 years ago, that these Indians were all dumb savages that walked across the Bering Straits 1300,000 BC without getting their feet wet, and nobody came by boat. Therefore, these European immigrants could, without guilt, take their land. And this story is told a little more emphatically by some of the Native Americans who knew all about it. But we don't know.
It's a little more than
about.
guilt, is it not?
Pardon me?
There, it's a little more than guilt, right? When we're talking about their need to take this land, wasn't there perhaps? I mean, there's legalities, right? For instance, if you're admitting to a previous party having visited this land, you can't just take it.
No, but that was the myth that was being perpetuated from the pulpits in the church and the lecterns in the universities, that the settlers under Jackson had the legal right to take the Indian lands. And that's the reason that the people in Ohio and Indiana and Wisconsin get driven across the Mississippi River because the whites wanted the land.
Right.
And so as long as you can fool the public into believing that, you go ahead. And that's what's happened. And it's still being defended by the patriarchal archaeologists to this day.
Absolutely. A narrative was whipped up for expediency because when there's gold in North Georgia and there's a whole lot of Cherokees that might not take nicely to you moving in with your mining operations and clearing, then you need a narrative that allows you to go in there and move those people. It's the same thing we see in the headlines today. You know, if you see what's going on in the world, and narratives are instituted in order for expediency of the greater empire, right? Yeah.
Aren't we happy that we don't have that sort of brainwashing today and fooling?
Yeah, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could think more clearly, perhaps more like these natives who we have been told many lies about, Perhaps if we could think more like they did and interact with this environment more like they did, and if we could learn more about how they did that through your work, really our work, the work of nearly everyone here right now tonight with us, if through that we can learn more about these people, then I think we get a better glimpse at how they moved through this place. And I think there's a lot for us to learn there.
Vince, he's been awfully quiet. Any input? You're muted.
Okay, let me try to share another picture of a horse from Mount Pisgah. And this one in particular has a bow and arrow and a cross with, two with dots on the outside edge. It looks like this is, a horse figurine, bow and arrow represented over here. And these wind lines or movement lines on the left-hand side indicate the horse moving forward. So this is an example from Mount Pisgah, North Carolina, as well as the previous one. There were 4 figurines with humans riding the mounted horses. Some of them actually depicted females riding side saddle. And in particular, one of them was in the Ancient American. I published an article about Mount Pisgah. There's also some other interesting figurines called the Oto tablet. And let me see if I can pull that one up. The Oto tablet was from Wisconsin, and here it is. This is actually a Catlinite tablet, and it has a picture of a horse on it.
Oh, really?
Not sure if you're
Where was
seeing it.
that found?
And so the Oto, just a second. Let me pull the information out just a second. So, but it was Catlinite. This one is in particular. Okay, just a second. The Catlinite tablet from that is shown here was colorized in a cast or a depiction of the horse, and so it shows what was shown depicted on the Catlinite engraved on it. Apparently, with the horse figure engraved. So
That one looks like a horse.
yeah, they are definitely horses. I mean, the Odo tablet in particular. This is an Eichenberger cast. Okay, it was found as a gift by the Odo Indians to Indian agent Major Albert Lamborn Green during the period of office from 1869 to 1872. It was a cast. The dimensions are 24 centimeters by 19 centimeters and 1.2 centimeter thickness. This is a Catlinite tablet, and it was colorized by Eichenberger in 1966 as a cast, and it's at the University of Missouri. This in particular, this tablet was a gift. So from the Oto Indians to the Indian agent Major Albert Lamborn Green, and it's like I said, it's made of Catlinite
Okay,
or
awesome.
pipestone.
When was it created?
Well, it's hard to say. It could have been made any time prior to being gifted to the Indian agent in 1872. So,
Where was the Indian agent at that time? Did it say?
it just said, gift from the Oto Indians to Indian agent Major Albert Lamborn Green. It doesn't say where it was gifted, but it's called the Oto tablet from the Oto Indians.
Well, I'm very interested in that for a couple of reasons. Number one, the Otos were a sub-tribe of the Ho-Chunk who were in Wisconsin. And Fort Winnebago was where the Indians and the government interacted. Another reason I'm interested is that Catanolite, the Catanite rock quarries are up where I grew up in northern Wisconsin in Barron County. Pipestone now is in Minnesota, but that's because the Sioux and the Chippewa fought over their symbol of peace up in Wisconsin for 100 years until finally the Sioux were driven out. And that was where the peace pipes, the calumets that and so on came from before they opened up the quarries in Minnesota. So it points back to Wisconsin and the river system up to the copper mines.
Jason, are you wanting to speak or just fighting with your microphone?
No, I was telling Vince to watch his mute whenever I'm listening to James. I get feedback from Vince's side. That's all. He handled it. He knew what I was. He read my mind.
We are going to buy him a set of headphones. Because that's what he needs. He needs a set of headphones.
Right. That's all. That's all it is. So, hey, Amy, Tom, yeah, we see you there in the chat. Thank you guys for coming here. We had a question about the Oto tablet, but I believe you answered it. And it's easy to, we mentioned the two different ways the horses could have been here, pre-Younger Dryas, strain somehow survives, or brought over by any one of these worldwide transoceanic travelers, right? Well, it's easy to imagine that then if a few horses are here, who knows how many, right? Anywhere from 10 to 100, you probably would not have the population explosion, right? Which would make them known to every single Native American population all over this country. Because I think that is probably part of the problem they have accepting it. For instance, reading the DeSoto Chronicles, right? There are several comments from several chiefs and natives referencing the horses and how these beasts, you'd never seen anything like them. You can't outrun them, right? So perhaps down in Florida, they hadn't encountered what anybody who went to Cahokia or up that way, had left behind some horses. Then we might see these representations from that area and not from others. That's just what occurred to me from what Vince was sharing. As we lose Vince, it seems.
But, Jim, so we have the colonizers arriving with horses, right? But we see that in the late 1600s, 1700s, the indigenous people had lots of horses already. They were already riding, right? So how is that the horses fell into Indian hands and became so numerous in their possession?
Well, it's about what part of the country too, isn't that correct? Because that wasn't the case everywhere.
Well, let me just reiterate what Pamita said. He said, we had horses before the Spanish. And had horses that got stolen. But he said there were pack animals. There were too small to ride.
Sure.
So we made them into pack animals like dogs, and we called them the big dogs. And the whole chunk verify that the name for horse is shunk hota or something like that, which means big dog, literally. And so I asked Pamita, well, what happened to these little horses? And he said, well, when the Spanish horses got here, we could ride them. So the little ones probably just died off, he said. But what I found within the last year or so is that in Canada, some people have found these little wild Mustangs running in the woods. And some families have actually bred them. They call them the spirit horses. They're too small to ride, but they keep them to go along with their stories.
And could they have crossed the little horses with the European horses?
Well, it would take a while before you got the horse big enough to ride, and that's what the Chinese.
Because it was that small. Okay.
The Chinese and the Mongols had the same problem, and once the Mongols got on horses, they could conquer other people. Well, they came, but that's where we seem to pick up the group of horse that the natives out west had. There was a group of natives that bred horses, and that's where Lewis and Clark wanted to go on when they got some horses. But those were, again, Chinese, from what I've been able to read. There weren't the Spanish, Arabic horses. So you had that group as well.
Because the the horses of the steppes of from the Mongols, they are also small horses,
They're small, but they can be
but they
ridden.
can be ridden. Yes.
Yes.
So this would be smaller still.
Oh yeah, like I say, when I was in China, in this poorest part of the poorest state, these are like Great Dane
Great
dogs,
Danes. Okay. Okay.
and they used them to pull carts out in the field. They wouldn't think of riding them.
So, Ricardo, as we cruise into our next hour here, I've had a chance to sort of absorb and watch. And what strikes me is when you two are just conversating, I can see you've obviously been working together. You can see sort of the rapport and ease. So, I would like to sort of, I guess, ask a question, but more sort of for you both. If you wanted to give us and the audience just any sample, I know there's things, that can and can't be spoken on, but any sort of idea of what it is you're working on, pick and choose from. I know, Ricardo, I don't want to misspeak. There's so many things you've told me that are going on there, so I don't want to say anything I shouldn't. But why don't you guys tell us a little bit about what it is that Mr. Shears is doing there on the ground, some of the things he's found, and what are you learning there with him, Ricardo?
No, Jim.
No, you talk, because I've got lots to bore people with. And
No. I want to know. He's asking, what are we working? What are you working on?
Trying to find all my maps right now, but
Give me back my maps.
we've got a group of people that are working, and archivist work is not something they teach in grade school or high school. And so if you can imagine high school kids going up into the archives and digging through stuff and putting everything out on the table, and then time to go home, they find whatever box is open and stuff it in. That's where we are. But the point is, we have a great deal of material over the last almost 40 years of studying and surveying Indian mounds. And what is interesting to me, and which I can contribute to and my colleague students, is the geometry that we have. Like, we learned geometry from the Greeks, from Euclid. And if it didn't happen at the time Euclid wrote his books, it's not possible in geometry. Well, that's not true. We've got stuff in this country that shows sacred geometry, how to square circles and trisect angles, things that Euclid had tried all his life to learn how to do because they were initiation rituals in the schools, and he couldn't figure it out without being initiated. So we teach it's impossible. It's not. These people over here, where they were doing the same thing, left enough information in organized rocks and so on, so that it's sort of like a professor didn't erase the blackboards when he left. And we've got site after site after site, so we can read them.
Right.
And so the geometry is fascinating. And to me, it's clear as a bell that there were not independent inventions on both sides of the ocean, that they were sharing information, which is what Pamita said as well. He said, we were not the dumb savages they talk about in your grade schools. We were part of a world community, and we knew it. And we had wise people, and we had schools for special wise people, just like the white man's colleges. And he said one of the sites were down at Newark, Ohio. He called it the Great Powwow Grounds. And he told me that were set up by the Panther priest, which can also be Balaam priest, the same in Mexico. And that people could go to school for 20 years, which is the same as a PhD. And the universities of the world. And so it makes sense that what we're looking at is as high a level as we would teach in our colleges, but it was not the same material as in the old world because
Right.
we burned the books in 400 AD,
Right.
and the people that came here would have been, if Pamita's statements are correct, at the time when they had colleges over there, and he said they taught the same thing in the colleges on both sides. So we shouldn't be surprised that we have the same survey units of furlongs and chains and engineer stations.
Things that are all based on observational, right? I mean, when it comes to furlong.
Exactly, not
links
something
of
that
the
would be
human
independent,
body.
invented.
Right.
And
All of
also-
this geometry is present, right? I mean, it's present in nature. We have this mind that we have to be looking for us. It's like we're always saying, Mr. Shears, in the antediluvian hunt, the hunt for the lost civilization. We say, yes, we're talking technologically advanced, but not us. We got to get out of the mindset of looking at for us. I think you're saying sort of the same thing here about the native people. We're looking at it with this Western mindset, trying to go, well, where's the university? Where's the college? Where's the advancement, right? But again, we're not looking for us, but we are looking for a people that would have existed in nature, in communion with it is the word I use, for long isolated stretches of time. And what would you have seen? You would have noticed nature more so than we are accustomed to with these eyes. You would have seen geometry present everywhere. You would have, what I'm seeing, just in flowers right now, let alone the fact that we already know many, if not nearly all, of these native peoples were using, again, shamanically, intentionally, like a tool, these psychedelic substances. And anyone who has either taken or studied psychedelic substances knows that geometric patterns, entopic phenomenon, are a part of that process. So either way, you have people who would have been just as familiar with the concepts that we call math and geometry, just simply not in the way that we were. That's what I think on it.
Exactly, but we have also said that certain things are not possible in geometry and teach our students that. Because Euclid didn't figure it out. He didn't write it down. But it is possible, and we can see it here. So it makes it exciting to me. It fills in the blanks of what got destroyed in the old world and we never reinvented. And that also relates to surveying and navigation, because there is a unit of surveying that the old world teachers say was invented 4000 BC, about the time or before Stonehenge, when people were making these rock circles and studying and going across the ocean, and pretty well figured out the earth is round, and like the Druids told the emperor of Rome, they had a college where they taught the earth is round and they knew the measure of it. These people did the same. And what is common on both sides of the ocean, no surprise, is what we call the nautical mile. It's 1 minute, defined as 1 minute of arc, 1/60th of a degree on the surface of the earth, latitude. It's around, today it's given as 6076. It used to be 6060 feet. It's in the sloping side of the Pyramid of Egypt. Well, we find it in the layout here. And so they understood probably better than the Europeans, because the Europeans got in a squabble over what to call God and so on and so forth, and burned each other's books. And here they just continued their working. And that once you understand the basics, then you can go across the land just like across the oceans. And we've got long range alignments between sites, which are way over the horizon. But if you take the direction and go from horizon to horizon, you can go from the Bighorn Medicine Wheel to the place called the Home of the White Wolf up in the UP of Michigan, just like old Ralph Red Fox. Cheyenne Elder said we could, and he asked us to survey so that he could find that site. So that's what's so exciting to me. It's like a new book, and it's partly blocked out by the censors in this country from the days of Euclid to the present. And they're very patriarchal, patri-
Patriotical.
patriarch about protecting their view of the world. Just like Shaman Lal said, there are people guarding this invisible wall around America, over which they'll allow no one to come from his part of the world before Columbus.
Jason, anything relevant from the chat? Any questions? Anything?
Oh gosh, what's up? We've got Tom talking about sacred geometry is related
You're
to
too far away from the mic.
Sacred geometry is related to multi-dimensionality, some much that folks confuse arcs and angles. Sacred geometry is composed of what? Arcs and angles. Where do you find an arc between two angles? So that's from Tom. Yeah, Tree Buddy just called me Shaman. So I guess thanks. Felt a lot of stuff. Yeah, we've got a reference to the mushrooms. They're following us everywhere today in the chat. So yeah, that's what's going on in the chat.
So the thing here that you could explain to us, Jim, is the difference between geometry on paper and what we are now calling practical geometry. So how was this geometry achieved? Can you explain to us how with a cord and a stick you can do all those calculations and achieve the same level of precision?
Well, the Masons used geometry riddles for their initiation rites at higher degrees. That's well known to Templars in the Old World, same here. And the mystery schools in the colleges in the days of Pythagoras were the same. It wasn't, there were certain part of geometry that would lead to precise geometry to make the an angle of a minute and a degree. Not everybody could do it, and there's only a certain way of doing it, and that's what I would call as sacred geometry because it relates to the golden ratio. And that was not to be told to the kids, nor is it today. If you talk about this sort of thing to a Masonic group, and there's a couple of young people in there, and they start talking about the oblong square, they must have been using that, and then they'd be hushed up by some of the more elder Masons. So it's still going on. There's certain things you don't talk about. And it's just like with the CIA today, there's certain things that they're not supposed to talk about. And once you've got a secret deal going, it has a tendency to perpetuate itself when the reason is gone. So what I see as sacred geometry, you can study books on it from the old country, and you can look at the churches and the layouts of the Pyramid of Egypt, and little time and thinking, you can figure out what was going on. And you can figure out from what's here and in our sacred sites how to square the circle and how to trisect an angle. And the site that you're working on up in Wisconsin Rapids is one of our key sites in the whole continent because it allows you to see what they don't teach in school, such that the golden ratio, or pi, as the Greeks called it, is equal to pi by a ratio of 10 to 12. It's just there, but it's in no book. You understand that, then you can throw away pi and do other calculating. So the geometry, as it's taught today, even in school, when did you start geometry? Third grade, fourth grade, fifth,
It's
sixth?
probably in Portugal at my time. It was probably the fifth, sixth, and sixth year.
Okay, so then they probably say, okay, take this compass and straight edge and make a circle. Oh, yeah, and then now put the radius on the circumference and you go around there. Oh, it's 6 times. That's how you divide the circle into six. That's magic. Divide each one of those, you get 30 degrees. And so that's a zodiac sign. And divide again, you get an hour angle or 15 degrees, how far the sun moves in an hour at a time. And all of a sudden, you see how everything is tied together.
I was not teach like that.
What's that?
Would be more interesting.
Well, of course, it's
that's
more
not how-
interesting, but what would you do then with the Masons and their secrecy? Why would anybody want to come and get the secrets that aren't talked
That's
about?
it. See, the secrecy are the problems, and that's what that world, that we all come from in the West, they were bred out of, is secrets are power. Whereas the people over here, perhaps they might have had a knowledge, that was kept only amongst those that passed it down, but there wasn't this secrecy. There was just a long time of this long progression of knowledge, which would not look like the knowledge that was held secret. But as you just so eloquently, I thought, described and pointed out, you still get there. It is literally everywhere. And a society living as connected as these people would have seen what you just painted for me, which was an image of how everything is connected, from the sun and its arc minute and its hour, the hour on our clock. It's all connected. And these people would have known that in a way that we from the Western culture mindset could not appreciate properly. Thank you.
And there is a site where you found the actual squaring of the circle. You have the circle.
Yeah, once we get to the site that you're working on now with your writing and so on, you can do it there too. It's so simple. You can't believe it. It's so simple. But it relates to the fact that pi is equal to phi by 10, a ratio of 10 to 12. Just that simple. Once you know that, but there's nowhere in the books, any books that you'll find it.
Vince, you as a 33-degree Mason, what do you have to tell us about this?
Well, I just wanted to share a picture of a horse back
You have to
riding.
speak louder, a little bit. I'm sorry,
Okay.
but try to speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, and if you're a Mason, you got to tell us when he accuses you of it now. So otherwise, if you don't declare yourself, there's trouble
Yeah.
back at the lodge. I
I'm
think
actually
supposed to
not-
give me you're supposed to give me your member number as well.
Well, I'm actually not a Mason, but hey, I mean, I'll take credit. I mean, I wish I was. But take a look at this. This is a Mount Pisgah figurine of someone who's riding side saddle on what appears to be a horse with a bridle and stirrups. And this is apparently looks like a female with a dress on, draped side saddle over this four-legged figure of a horse. And I was able to get this scanned from the Valentine Museum, and this is from Mount Pisgah, North Carolina. So this particular figure is it looks like baked clay. It's made out of some kind of pottery. It's been fractured and damaged heavily, but this was part of the Mount Pisgah relics, and you can see, well, it has these nested chevron engravings on all sides of it, and very interesting, intricate engravings, and this female figurine sitting side saddle. So I looked up the history of riding side saddle, and it's quite interesting. This dates back to the 1300s, when Queen Anne of Bohemia rode side saddle to marry King Richard II of England in 1382, and this goes back. This depiction goes back to the 6th century, actually, with the history of side saddle riding. It was used in England as well as In the 16th century, Catherine de Medici was depicted as riding side saddle on the horse to help them trot and canter. It was a style that was used throughout the time all the way up to the 1800s. In the late 19th century, they used side saddle riding to indicate a style and the quality of horsemanship, horseback riding. So this was also similar to a lot of the Chinese tomb figurines. They had depicted people riding side saddle as well.
Well,
And
in this case, I'm more inclined to say that that looks more like a bear, would you say, because of the ears?
well, it could
But
be. It's
but my question is, the head looks undeveloped in relation to everything else. So my question is, would it have a wig or a hairdressing, something that was added to the statue and obviously didn't survive, or do you think that's exactly how it is? Do you know? Are familiar with this style, Jim?
Well, I don't have much to comment on there. How would you depict something you never saw before, a horse? You'd probably make them similar to something you do
You do
know.
know exactly, yeah. Well, because Vince has showed us images of uh, uh, hippopotamus, rhinoceros. I think it's rhinoceros that you showed us.
yeah. There's even rhino figurines in the Mount Pisgah relics as well that are similar to Egyptian statuary from the Middle Dynasty. But yeah, I mean, if this was something that they're interpreting from what they hear, like learning about this, that they ride animals, and then maybe they thought of it as a bear. I mean, it's possible they just used what they thought they could that this would be like, and it was kind of like the telephone line. You know, they hear what they're described as, but maybe they didn't see it in person.
But I remember when we had our two interviews with you here in the Shaman of Philosopher, and we got somewhat to a conclusion that they were creating figurines of things that they never saw but were being described to, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that that's a possibility, but also it could be that they're using these as totems. You know, actual figurines that represent the person instead of the animal itself.
Vince, you mentioned a rhinoceros image. Well, up at Green Lake, Wisconsin, which was the place where the Ho Chunk had their summer capital, and there are still mounds there, big mounds, and it's got a beautiful effigy mound of a rhinoceros. It has to be. And
Wow.
they disappeared here long before the mastodons. So somebody must have gone over to Europe and saw it and came back and made a postcard of what he saw.
No, you have to have gone to Africa or Asia, because in Europe they were extinct even before they were extinct.
I think they had them in Asia, didn't they?
Yeah, in Asia.
Yeah, Asia, Africa. I mean,
But there are
it's
many figurines relating to Africa that you showed us.
yeah, they had African capybara, emus, even what looked like platypus.
Capybara is from South America,
Africa. Yeah, that's from Central Africa.
Brazil.
Okay, Brazil. I wasn't aware of that.
Capybara is a Brazilian
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, these figurines are from all over the place, and I think it's important that it shows the long distance travel and that they were communicating about their clans. I mean, it seems to me that these were their clan symbols because they often were depicted with human faces on these animals.
And
So it was like they're what?
I would like to second that. We have a acting doctor where I'm staying from Nigeria. Amik, his name is. And we have a site up in the UP near the ancient copper mines. It's the only intact copper mine, full copper mine that I know about at Amik. And why the two? Well, if there were ships coming to those harbors up in the UP who were Phoenician, what would you expect the crew to be? Phoenicians are from Africa, so half of them would have been black, you'd expect. So I asked Amik, what does your name mean in your native language? Oh, it's something that's valuable, like money. What does it mean to the Native Americans? Amik is beaver. Beaver's like buck, something to trade. Too much of a coincidence to not have some possible connection to at least keep alive.
Well, I would say that the Phoenicians would have their own people on the upper deck and would have slaves rowing, probably captured from the tribes furthest to the south of Africa, that would be the rowers. So I don't think they were there because they want to. So if they happen to flee once they arrived to the Americas somehow, managed to escape, it could justify some of the people. But for instance, I think we all agree at this point that your um, your chief, what's it, Tuscaloosa, was an enormous black man, right? The Black Warrior. Do you also
Well,
think he was a black man?
That's my understanding when I visited down there.
I the Spaniards don't necessarily delineate them as such. They sort of put them in the same. They don't delineate them him having a different pigment than the rest of the natives. They do talk about the size, and they do talk about the handsomeness, and they mean that both of the men and the women, or the beauty of the way these people were put together. So much so that several wives were kidnapped and taken down to South America to show off when they finally got out of here. Yeah, but I know, the Black Warrior is the river, right, that runs through the town of Tuscaloosa here in Alabama. Funny enough, which is nowhere really near what would have been the majority of Tuscaloosa's territory. A lot of people get that wrong. You can tell when you're watching content about Mobilla online and somebody, starts quoting the town of Tuscaloosa having been in his territory, you know they're from afar. Anyhow, though, yeah, there's nothing from the Spaniards to delineate that his pigment was any darker than the rest. But there is that illusion that there's the Black Warrior River and that Tuscaloosa was, standing for Black Warrior.
I'll just interject here. When Ancient Artifact Preservation Society was set up over the objection of the state archaeologists up in the UP, as soon as it got set up, we had a lady move from Louisiana up there because she wanted to be part of the new era where the Indian stories are going to be told. Well, if you saw her walking down the hall, you'd say she just got off the plane from Nigeria. You know her? Yeah. Edith. And, well, yeah, well, how come? Well, I'm Native American. I'm from the Wichita tribe. And we were a black colony that was brought over here by King such and such. And we were in control in the area down around Poverty Point, Louisiana. And when the French sold the land to America, they never paid us for it. And they tried to make slaves out of us. So that's very real. And she maintains that happened. And there are people who have checked into it, and it can be verified that a particular king from Africa sent out a fleet of people who never came back, thousands of them. And so the natives up there, the other, like the Potawatomi, the Ojibwas, the Ho Chunks, all say, yeah, Grandma said there were blacks here before the slaves.
And at least one or two of the indigenous people that were at the inauguration of the Baraga Museum,
Oh,
if I had not been introduced before that these tribes have black people, I would have thought that this guy just arrived here from, or it's the son of Africans. He's not a tribal member for sure.
Yeah, sure.
But no, the tribe has really black people that are not Africans. They're Americans. So, and that to me was that lady was the first contact that I have with that, because I'm something I'm missing here. But no, these people arrived here long before that, so there were already black people here.
Yeah, and James mentioned the king from Egypt. That's that you hear a lot about that. I know that when researching like the Kincaid caves out in the Grand Canyon, you hear that they found Egyptian artifacts, and that is one of the stories they often mention is that history does document quite a number of people disappearing from Egypt or Africa. Yeah, I forget the name, but yeah, I've heard that myself.
Anything to add, Vince? You are muted, so we can't hear you.
Well, the Mount Pisgah relics, they show a good collaboration there or agreement with African connection. Even a symbol of Tanit, the North African goddess of Carthage, shows up in Mount Pisgah, North Carolina. And they had a similar rhino figurine of the Middle Dynasty in Africa, in Egypt, actually, dated 2040 BC. And so this time frame goes way back into the Archaic period, I believe, in the use of the rhino. And they also had a very strong correlation with the anomaly of Sierra Leone in West Africa, where the Sierra Leone anomaly were figurines that matched the depictions found in North Carolina, and they were made of enstatite, the same material they used on North Carolina figurines. So in Sierra Leone, this is the Ivory Coast, and they were finding these figurines when they were going around looking for diamonds and doing mining. Some of these figurines were found very deep, and they dated them back to at least 25,000 years ago
Holy cow.
in the layers that deep. So they found these figurines in caches or cache, abundant groups buried together, and they're very just mysterious because how did they get there is a mystery. No one knows. There's tribal figurines. These often depict chiefs' heads or clan symbols, and it looks like there's a strong correlation between the Mount Pisgah figurines and the Sierra Leone anomaly.
Could you describe this Mount Pisgah more? I'm not familiar with it.
Well, it's in the latest Pharaohs magazine. I'm really excited about the latest Pharaohs magazine that just came out this month, and there's an article about these with a good level of detail in comparison. Let me see if I can pull that up and share it.
Thank you. We failed to do our publicity, but
Microphone.
the microphone is. You have to keep the light turning to you. I was saying that we are forgetting to do our publicity, but Vince is on top of things. So
Yeah. So yeah, the Pharaohs magazine was just published this month, and I'm trying to pull up the link here on.
you can just go to the website, Institute for Natural Philosophy.org, and then press Pharaohs. Has J-
Okay, I'm
has
going.
Jacob anything to say to us?
Yeah, no, he's chewing, he's eating my chair. You know, it's down at the bottom of it. He's like, ah, for the past 10 minutes, and so I'm just chill the fuck out for a second because I'm about to have to pause this and do something.
That's why you're getting lower and lower. He's cheering.
Exactly, and why I keep muting because there's just kind of going on over here. Sorry, guys.
Okay, just a second. Here it is. All right, so the latest and greatest publication is the third issue of Pharaoh's magazine, and the article about these Mount Pishka figurines begins on page 70.
Ooh, I'm on page 2.
Show page 2, please. You have to
Okay.
maximize it, otherwise we can't see much.
Yeah, let me do that. All right, trying to maximize.
No, I mean
When I took that picture, Ricardo, I could have never imagined the ways in which it would then be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about that? There he is. That's amazing. All right,
Yeah,
so
that's hilarious. Yeah, that picture, dude. I don't know what. I took a whole bunch of pictures of me standing next to that thing, but as I'm walking away, I tell Logan, "No, one more. I need something with the eyes cutting. You know, like really." And you know, now it's just the picture. All right, go ahead, Vince. Show us the work going on in this magazine, not my modeling.
all right, so we've got on page 70 the article about Mount Pishka. Here it is. Okay, so Mount Pishka, North Carolina. I first read about these articles in the National Anthropological Archives. They were found back in 1879 through 1882 by Man Valentine and his archaeological crew. When they started showing up in this area, this was the Cherokee village. I mean, it had been abandoned in the Trail of Tears, and it had been just left there. The the artifacts covered about 15 square miles, and they
50
included,
square miles of artifacts.
yes, I mean, it was covering the land, and these were often associated with paint cups. There were red paint, yellow paint, blue paint, even black paint and pigment in cups, and they were washing out of the soil. Some of them were in mounds. There were twin earth lodges, and earth lodges, being hollowed out mounds that were, built as an earth lodge. Some of them, these included mound HW 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, and 9. So there's a lot of mounds here. They dug up and they tunneled into these earth lodges. Well, each of these figurines, like this here, you can see the statue here. This is from Sierra Leone. This is from Mount Pishka. They both show an image with their chin resting on a crosshatched staff or object that has crosshatching on it. Try to zoom in on it so you can see it really well. So the difference between these is this is from Sierra Leone. This is from Mount Pishka, North Carolina. And the Sapi people of Western Africa were making these, and the people in North Carolina were making these. So it's these were made of both made of steatite, but had been converted into enstatite by heating it to over 1100 degrees C. When they take steatite, they carved it and then they heated it up in a kiln or oven, baking it to over 1100 C to change the material to enstatite.
Okay,
And
that is the problem there, because we are told that they could not create furnaces up to those temperatures. That is the more or less the top temperature to create bronze. So it's
Well, it's
because bronze starts to melt at around 800, 900 C. Copper. So
and I can tell you, I have the glazed figurine, the glazed pottery from Cahokia, made in blue glaze. That glaze would have taken 1100 degrees C to make as well.
that's
So
why I'm pointing it, because it's an addition to your position here, because this
They,
also is being rejected, but because it also shows technology of furnaces that they say they didn't have.
well, at Kofitacheke, even in the journals of the Spaniards and the natives, they had furnaces. They were making things in kilns. So with a kiln, they're able to achieve this high temperature.
Am I saying something wrong, Jim? Didn't they say that the indigenous people didn't have high temperature kilns?
Yeah, they certain people get it in their bonnet that the Indians aren't capable of doing that. But it's baloney because up there near Oconto, Wisconsin, which is a copper site, uh, there's there's in a pit, a refuse pit, a copper ingot that has been melted. And of course, they say that no ancient copper miner could do that. I've always said, well, why couldn't they do it? Because Powers Bluff, they were melting copper points and stuff. Well, it's because of our dictum, our dogma. They were incapable of doing it, right? So I will respond to that somebody was melting copper up there where they say they couldn't. And the guy who tried to publish in the Wisconsin Archaeologist got threatened by this professor down in Illinois that I'm going to ruin you unless you pull this article out. And he had the guts to write it down in a magazine out on the plains. This is a dictum. It's a belief system that they couldn't do it. They were making full bronze digging sticks in South America at the same time. Why couldn't they do it up here? Because these are dumb Indians. And if you let them have the ability to melt, well, then it makes your case weaker for taking their land.
Sure.
I mean,
And Vince, can you pull up that Spire Davis map?
Let's see, what page is that? Let's see. I think it's right after this. This
Yeah.
one here.
Isn't
Yeah.
it at this site that is supposed to have iron kilns at one of the entrance that they destroyed? Three or
yeah,
four?
there's quite a few of them down there. Ellington, Murray, and a mechanical engineer did some work down there. I've seen also pictures from the French of Indians with billows making melting iron or melting metal.
Because iron is 15 to 1600 degrees Celsius. It's even higher than copper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, if you look at even in Spiro Mountain in Oklahoma, they found smelted copper hairpins made of smelted copper, 26 centimeters long.
They
had,
did.
Yep. They found hairpins made of smelted copper.
Do
And
they let that let the public know about that, or
you know, they initially they called it a plant, like someone had created these and planted it in Spiro Mound.
yeah, sure, sure,
And
fake.
everything else, yeah, they're fake. Like everything else there is real except for these. They said
Yeah.
the Smithsonian made an article saying these smelted copper pins were planted in the
Yeah.
mound.
Presumption
But-
of fraud, as Joe Mann would say. So the point is, that's one of the things that we have said are impossible because of the beliefs of certain people. And that belief system is right anchored in the Smithsonian Institute and the whole system that controls what we teach in our school.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter has to do with the data. And the data would say somebody here could do that years ago.
Right, and it's been held for too long that the Indians couldn't have smelted anything, but in fact they could. I mean, they had copper plates, and they had copper axes, copper celts embedded with cloth imprinted on them. So I mean, there's clear evidence of melted copper that they used in making celts, and the only way to do that is to smelt it.
Right.
Even to melt it, you need at least 800 degrees Celsius.
Oh,
Yeah.
speaking of that, we saw on the last trip to the UP a copper ingot that had that same sign on it. Yeah. That should wind up at that new museum.
At Baraga Museum, yeah. Can you zoom in those so we can see what you're talking
Yeah,
about?
take a look at this. Earlier, we were talking about Tanit. Well, this figure up here wanted to share this and ask if your opinion on whether this might be Tanit. Well, so Tanit is typically a triangular figure with a circle head on top of it, the arms outstretched. And this one is from Mount Pisgah, North Carolina. And this one over here, this is the one at the Smithsonian that looks like an alligator with teeth showing, and it has apparent Sequoia syllabary on it that's translates to from Nev Ni High. The phonetic translation is the immortals in
Can you
English.
associate the figurine with this wording? Is anything on your experience that
Yeah, I've seen Tanit a lot of. Yeah, always with the arms.
What about the fact, Vincent, that on a lot of these figurines, there seems to be more attention paid to the animal faces than the human faces. The human faces are a couple of dots, and the animals are very detailed.
Yeah, they had used these as dotem, like dotem bags. Like, see this one, the Rat Man. Well, they depicted a very detailed rat or kneeling figurine with human like characteristics, holding up a what looks like a human skull in its mouth, and these were found in Ohio as well. They had other figurines of dogs eating human heads at the C.F. Pricer Mound in Ohio, and I mean they had just run the gamut. The entire all the different clan symbols were represented.
There's
Every
the
single
rhino up there.
Anishinaabe clan. What's that?
The rhino up there at the top
Yeah.
left.
Up here's that rhino we were
Wow.
talking about.
Super.
This is the one from Mount Pisgah, and over here on the left is from Egypt. And so the Egyptian one is dated Middle Dynasty, and it's 2040 BC. And I mean,
But that's a hippo, right?
It looks like a hippo.
yeah, hippo, or it doesn't have that antler horn on the middle of the face, but
so
it has.
like a hippo.
But they both have the platform underneath their feet,
Yeah, you see that
and
style.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, when I looked at the image, I thought, well, the left one is the one in Mount Pisgah, and the rhino is the one that is in a country that has rhinos. But no, the rhino
Right.
is from Mount Pisgah, and not the other way around.
yeah,
Have you seen any more images like that one?
Like I say, a big effigy mound at Green Lake is just like that, just as clear.
wow. And then
Yeah.
uh,
At some point, there was connection, right? It doesn't have to be that the animals were here or that they went to where the animals were. It could have been that somebody who had a picture of the animals came through, or a likeness of the animals, or described the animal. Yeah.
When I used to go to some of these sites with the students, some of the native students, they were saying, oh, and we used to go back with the traders and visit. And one of the sites we used to go to had gold on the roof. That really made an impression on us. And what are they talking about? Are they talking about Jerusalem? Are they talking about Buddhism? But
Right.
they're talking about routine. When they were young, they went back with the traders for a year and came back.
Wow. That's amazing. I've never heard that.
No, you
Stories
won't
of-
hear it from the whites, it's from the natives.
Yeah, no, exactly. And thank you for putting it out. As we come up here on our 2 hour mark, that's usually where we try to wrap it. Um, I want to say thank you. You know, not for everything you do, obviously. I mean, that's goes without saying. But tonight, when you were describing, when Ricardo asked you about the to describe how they were using the geometry, right? And that picture you painted of everything being connected, that really harps into really what I'm finding. You know, everything that I'm doing, James, is really highlighting for me just how these people walked. You know, finding this large impact crater that seems represented with this crescent-shaped mound 12 miles away, potentially used as a burial mound. Walking this landscape every day, finding these quartz harvesting points, you know, and then these quartz artifacts scattered all through this landscape. You just get a picture of a people that you realize the picture we have is like just a little snapshot, you know, a little sliver, right? That they were encompassing the taking into account the whole, you know, whereas in Western Civ we also we're used to taking, you know, little tiny slices of all of reality and saying that's the whole. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to know more about what you're doing, to learn more about what Ricardo's helping you with, but also just to continue to grow my own perception about what these people were here and how they were walking. And that's why I personally find this work of yours so valuable, because that just, you know, that's where I am with my work, James. I'm right where I've gotten to this point of trying to grasp what it was these people, both spiritually and materially, what that culture looked like, felt like, and was before it all got erased, you know. And so, yes, we're only working with pieces and hints, but still, even when you have such a lack of evidence, every little bit, it seems like a lot, and it just really fleshes out this picture for us, you know, relatively speaking. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed that part of tonight.
Jason, I just want to add that I think that part of our ignorance is because the work of people like James and others that work with him and others that he related to or researched with have written an incredible amount of material that it's just not known because the dogma persists, right? Because otherwise we would be much more informed that we are at this point, because these materials have never been widespread and they are highly suppressed. So Jim was suppressed as he was a teacher, and he was not even as close, as deep in knowledge as he became after that. He was. You were learning at that time, so you were finding these things on the ground, right?
Well, the lawsuits were against my students.
So it's unbelievable.
Remove the golden ratio from their maps. They're going to have them on their maps. And I said, holy cow, we're still in the dark ages. And we graduate students under the umbrella of science, but are working like before the days of Newton.
Yep, that's what I've been saying, man. It's exactly what's going on. It's like it's the dark ages. Yep. That and keeping everything behind a paywall and behind a sort of elite control group. You know, much of academia is just like it all functions, whether you're talking government, academia, or secret society, they all function off having knowledge as power, right? So, you know, they want to keep this construct, you know, that not only makes money, but it keeps power centralized. Only this certain group of people have the power to add to human knowledge, you know, and that's just a fucking sin. Excuse my language. I don't care which part of Earth you're on. Knowledge about our past and who we are and what we are is the absolute right of all of us. Yeah, so thank you, James.
Thank you.
Vince, any last words?
Thank you, James. That was really interesting. Thanks, Ricardo. Thanks, Shaman. I just wanted to point out that, hey, Maria Martinez also fired Blackware Pottery. Her temperature that she reached was 1200 to 1400 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 760 degrees C. But she used kilns and cow chips to do that. So they were pretty close to getting over 1,000 degrees C
But
with,
she was cow chips. That's what you said.
yeah, cow chips.
Cow shit.
Yeah, that's the problem because it isn't as efficient as even the less efficient just coal from burning wood. So if they would use wood on that same furnace, I'm sure they will get to 1100 with actual coal from wood.
Or with fat wood. You know what fat wood is, right? So
No.
lighter, James, you know what lighter is when pine trees. Okay, so when a pine tree dies, all the sap coalesces and condenses down in the taproot. Right now, you call that. Some people call it fat wood because when you slice it, it looks like a fat piece of ham or something. But it's full of the terpenes, right? And that's what turpentine comes from. You can actually make a bomb out of this stuff. I keep plenty handy. You can find it in all the woods. Anyhow, it's exceptionally flammable, Ricardo, and it burns at a extremely high heat. I have a buddy of mine that in his backyard, you know, kind of redneck style, works with smelting, and he does it with simply bricks. He doesn't even mortar in the furnace. He just stacks bricks, but he uses fat wood as his heat. And fat wood burns exceptionally fast. Now, hot, but also fast. So if you're going to use it on an industrialized scale, you would have to have a fair amount of it, which is readily available. I mean, any piece of wood, you know, right here around this house within a mile, we go looking, Ricardo, and I'll come back with 30 stumps, you know, marked within just a few moments. But yeah, there are ways that they could have gotten the heat that aren't just generally accounted for. On that note,
Well,
heat that's not generally accounted for.
you know, we had boats and we had kilns, and on that bombshell.
And Mother Nature gave us geometry. We have fat wood, and yeah, you know, it's all here. And we need to quit underappreciating these people. We need to start really getting their story told instead of, you know, buried. And thank you for doing your share for your entire life on that, Mr. Shears.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would say we all would benefit by, like the old timers, sitting and contemplating our navel and realizing that divides your heights by the golden ratio, and we're all part of it.
Exactly. It's right. It's right here. You see it right here in your own body. Yep. It's not a mystery. All these mystery schools and secret societies just wanted it to be so that they could control their power and, you know, get corrupt and stuff. But not us. We're out here just wanting to spread this knowledge because we believe that our best future does indeed require the truth of our past. And if you out there in the chat, thank you, are an independent researcher, activist, communicator, artist, and you have information that you believe is important to the whole, then come talk to us, please, at the Institute of Natural Philosophy, because we would love to talk to you. Mr. Shears, thank you. Vincent, thank you. Ricardo, thank you. Jason, thank you. All of us here together, independent researchers, doing our part to get information we believe is important to the whole out there to you all. Thank you for playing your part, and we'll see you in a couple days, guys.
Thank you very much, and a very fond farewell to all. Thank you, all the people in the chat. Thank you very much. You're all appreciated. Thank you. Bye bye. Till next time.